The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor penthouse, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Robert Harrison stood in his home office, staring at the city below, while his phone buzzed with endless notifications. As the founder of one of the world's largest tech companies, his net worth had crossed $3 billion last year. Yet standing there in his custom-tailored suit, he felt like the poorest man alive. "Daddy?" a small voice called from down the hallway. Robert's shoulders tensed. It was 7:30 a.m., which meant his 8-year-old daughter Lily was awake and would need help getting ready for another day of homeschooling. He loved his daughter more than life itself, but every interaction reminded him of what they had lost 3 years ago. The accident had happened on a family ski trip in Switzerland. Lily had been racing down the slope, her blonde hair flying behind, her like a banner of pure joy. Robert could still hear her laughter echoing in his memory. Then came the crash with another skier, the terrible silence, and the helicopter ride to the hospital that changed everything forever. Spinal muscular atrophy, the doctors had explained. The accident had triggered a rare genetic condition that had been dormant until then. Lily's muscles would gradually weaken, and she would need a wheelchair for the rest of her life. At 8 years old, she had to learn that running, dancing, and even standing for long periods were now impossible dreams. Robert walked slowly toward his daughter's room, each step feeling heavier than the last. The hallway was lined with family, photos from happier times. There was Lily at age 5, spinning in a pink tutu at her first dance recital. Another showed her climbing a tree in their Hamptons estate, grinning with dirt smudged on her cheek. The most painful one was from her 6th birthday party, where she was mid-jump on a trampoline, arms spread wide like she was trying to fly. Now those photos felt like evidence of a different life, one that belonged to a different family. "Good morning, sweetheart," Robert said as he entered Lily's bedroom. The space looked more like a medical facility than a child's room. There was a hospital bed with safety rails, oxygen equipment humming quietly in the corner, and a specialized wheelchair that had cost more than most people's cars. The pink princess decorations seemed out of place among all the medical equipment. Lily was sitting up in bed, her legs covered by a cheerful yellow blanket. She had her mother's green eyes and his stubborn chin, but her smile had faded over the past year. Where once she had been a chatterbox who could talk for hours about her favorite cartoons or the stories she made up about her stuffed animals, now she mostly stayed quiet. "The nurse called in sick again," Robert said, trying to keep his voice light. "Looks like it's just you and me today, kiddo." This was the 4th nurse to quit in 2 months. The first one had lasted only a week before complaining that Lily was uncooperative during physical therapy sessions. The second had quit after Lily threw a book at her for trying to take away her art supplies during lunchtime. The third had simply stopped showing up after Lily refused to speak to her for 3 days straight. Robert couldn't blame his daughter for acting out. She was a smart kid who understood exactly what her life had become. She knew that every person who walked through their door was paid to be there. She knew that the children she used to play with at school were now living completely different lives while she was stuck in this penthouse that felt more like a beautiful prison. "I don't want another nurse," Lily said quietly, playing with the edge of her blanket. "They always want to make me do exercises that hurt, and they talk to me like I'm stupid." Robert sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to disturb the various tubes and wires. "The exercises are supposed to help keep your muscles strong, sweetheart, and nobody thinks you're stupid. You're the smartest 8-year-old I know." Then, "Why won't you let me go to real school anymore? Why can't I see my friends?" The question hit Robert like a punch to the chest. He had pulled Lily out of her private school after the accident, telling himself it was for her safety and comfort. The truth was more complicated. He couldn't bear the thought of other parents looking at his daughter with pity. He couldn't stand the idea of her being different, of being the kid everyone felt sorry for. "We've talked about this," he said. "Your tutor is excellent, and you're learning so much here at home. Plus, you have everything you need right here. Everything. Except friends, except normalcy, except the chance to be a regular kid." But Robert couldn't say that out loud. After helping Lily get ready for the day, Robert retreated to his office for back-to-back video conferences. His company was launching a new product line, and there were decisions that only he could make. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was revolutionizing how people connected with technology while his own daughter sat alone in her room, isolated from the world. By lunchtime, Robert had made 3 major business decisions worth millions of dollars, but he felt like a complete failure as a father. He found Lily in the living room, parked in her wheelchair in front of the massive television. She wasn't really watching the cartoon on screen. Instead, she was staring out the window at the park across the street, where children were running and playing. "Are you hungry?" Robert asked. "I could have the chef make your favorite pasta?" Lily shrugged. Food had become just another necessity to get through the day. That afternoon, while Lily worked with her tutor, Robert sat in his office trying to focus on quarterly reports. But his mind kept wandering to the conversation with the employment agency that morning. They were running out of qualified candidates for Lily's care. Most nurses wanted to work in hospitals or clinics, not as private caregivers for difficult children. The few who were interested demanded salaries that, while Robert could easily afford them, seemed to come with an attitude that his daughter was more of a medical case than a little girl. The employment agent had mentioned one more possibility. A woman named Grace Thompson, who had been working as a housekeeper for wealthy families in the city. She didn't have formal medical training, but she had experience caring for elderly family members and came with excellent references for her kindness and reliability. "She's not technically qualified for medical care," the agent had warned. "But some families prefer someone who focuses more on companionship and daily living skills rather than clinical care." At first, Robert had dismissed the idea. His daughter needed proper medical supervision, not just someone to keep her company. But as the day wore on and he watched Lily's listless behavior, he began to reconsider. Maybe what his daughter needed wasn't another medical professional. Maybe she needed someone who would see her as a child first and a patient second. That evening, while Lily picked at her dinner, Robert made the call. "Hello, this is Grace Thompson," answered a warm voice with a slight Caribbean accent. "Ms. Thompson, this is Robert Harrison. I believe the agency spoke to you about a position caring for my daughter." "Yes, sir. They told me about little Lily. I understand she's been through a lot." Something in the woman's voice made Robert pause. There was genuine sympathy there, not the clinical detachment he had grown used to from medical professionals. "I should be honest with you," Robert said. "My daughter can be challenging. She's been through several caregivers recently. This isn't just about medical care. She needs someone who can help her feel like a normal kid again, if that's even possible." "Mr. Harrison," Grace said gently, "every child deserves to feel joy, no matter what challenges they face. If you're willing to give me a chance, I'd love to meet Lily." After hanging up, Robert found himself feeling something he hadn't experienced in months, a tiny spark of hope. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this woman could reach his daughter in ways that all the expensive specialists and professional nurses couldn't. He had no idea how dramatically Grace Thompson was about to change both their lives. The next morning, as Robert waited for Grace to arrive for her interview, he watched Lily sitting by the window again. She was holding one of her old dance shoes, turning it over in her small hands like it was an artifact from a lost civilization. In that moment, Robert made a silent promise to his daughter and to himself. Something had to change. His money could buy the best medical care in the world, but it couldn't buy back his daughter's happiness. Maybe it was time to try something different. Maybe it was time to let someone new into their carefully controlled world, even if that someone didn't have fancy credentials or years of medical training. As the elevator chimed to announce Grace's arrival, Robert took a deep breath. He was about to make a decision that would prove money wasn't everything, and sometimes the most important qualifications couldn't be found on a resume. Grace Thompson stepped out of the elevator carrying a small canvas bag and wearing a simple blue dress that had seen better days. At 45, she had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners and hands that told the story of years spent taking care of others. Robert had expected someone more formal, more clinical. Instead, Grace looked like she could be anyone's favorite aunt. "Mr. Harrison," she said with a warm smile, extending her hand. "Thank you for this opportunity." Robert shook her hand, surprised by her firm grip and direct eye contact. Most of the previous nurses had seemed intimidated by his wealth, constantly apologizing and speaking in hushed tones. Grace acted like she was meeting an old friend. "Please come in," Robert said, leading her toward the living room. "Lily is having her tutoring session right now, but she should be finished soon." Grace followed him through the penthouse, and Robert found himself seeing his home through her eyes. The marble floors, the designer furniture, the artwork that cost more than most people made in a year. Grace didn't gawk or seem impressed. She simply nodded politely and kept walking. "This is a beautiful home," she said simply. "But it must feel very quiet for a little girl." The comment caught Robert off guard. No one had ever suggested that his carefully curated living space might not be perfect for his daughter. When they reached the living room, Grace walked directly to the windows overlooking the park. Down below, children were playing on swings and slides while their parents watched from nearby benches. "Lily spends a lot of time looking out this window," Robert said, following Grace's gaze. "I can see why," Grace replied. "There's a whole world of life happening down there." Just then, they heard the sound of Lily's tutor packing up his materials. Robert had hired the best private educator money could buy, a man with degrees from prestigious universities who specialized in advanced learning for gifted children. But as Mr. Peterson walked past them toward the elevator, he looked tired and frustrated. "How did today's session go?" Robert asked. Mr. Peterson paused and glanced toward Lily's room. She completed her assignments, but she barely spoke. "Her mind is clearly elsewhere. I'm concerned about her engagement with the material." After the tutor left, Robert led Grace down the hallway toward Lily's room. They found the 8-year-old sitting in her wheelchair, staring at a math workbook, but not really seeing it. Her blonde hair hung down like a curtain, hiding her face. "Lily," Robert said softly, "I'd like you to meet Grace. She's here to spend some time with you." Lily looked up briefly, gave Grace the same polite but distant look she had given every other caregiver, and then returned her attention to the workbook. "Hello, Lily," Grace said, pulling up a chair to sit at the girl's eye level. That looks like some pretty serious math you're working on. Lily shrugged. It's just fractions. It's easy. Easy for you, maybe, Grace said with a laugh. I still have to count on my fingers sometimes. This got a tiny flicker of interest from Lily, who glanced up again. Most adults told her how smart she was, or how proud they were of her work. Grace was the first person to admit she might not be as good at something as Lily was. Robert watched this exchange with interest. Grace wasn't using the overly cheerful voice that most caregivers adopted with children. She was talking to Lily like she was a real person with real thoughts and feelings. Mr. Harrison, Grace said, turning to Robert, would it be all right if Lily and I spent some time getting to know each other? Maybe you could check on us later? Robert hesitated. He didn't like leaving Lily alone with someone new, especially someone without medical training. But something about Grace's calm confidence made him feel like it might be okay. I'll be in my office if you need anything, he said finally. After Robert left, Grace sat quietly for a moment, letting Lily get used to her presence. Most of the previous caregivers had immediately started talking about schedules and therapy exercises and medical needs. Grace just sat there, occasionally glancing around the room. You know what I notice about this room? Grace said eventually. Lily looked up from her workbook. What? It's very clean and organized, but it doesn't really tell me much about you. Where are all your favorite things? Lily gestured vaguely toward a bookshelf lined with educational materials and a few stuffed animals that looked like they hadn't been touched in months. Those are nice, Grace said. But I mean your real favorite things. The stuff that makes you happy. The things you love so much you don't want to put them away. Lily considered this question seriously. I used to have a lot of things like that, but most of them are in boxes now. In boxes? Why? Because I can't use them anymore. Lily's voice was matter-of-fact, but Grace could hear the sadness underneath. Grace nodded thoughtfully. Can you tell me about some of those things? For the first time since Grace had arrived, Lily's face showed a spark of real emotion. I had this keyboard that I got for my 7th birthday. I was learning to play songs, and I had art supplies, really good ones, and books about places I wanted to visit someday. What happened to them? Daddy put them away after the accident. He said they would just make me sad, because I can't do those things the same way anymore. Grace felt her heart break a little. She could understand Robert's thinking, but she also knew that taking away the things that brought joy wasn't the answer to dealing with loss. What if I told you, Grace said carefully, that maybe you could do those things differently, but still do them? Lily looked skeptical. The doctor said I need to focus on my therapy and getting stronger. They said other activities might tire me out. Well, Grace said with a smile, I'm not a doctor, so maybe I don't know any better. But where I come from, we believe that the things that make you happy also make you stronger. That afternoon, while Robert was on a conference call, Grace asked Lily to show her around the penthouse. It was the first time in months that Lily had left her room for anything other than meals or medical appointments. As they moved through the apartment, Grace asked questions that no one had asked before. Not about Lily's condition or her limitations, but about her preferences and opinions. Did she like the color of the walls in the living room? What was her favorite spot in the apartment? If she could change anything about her room, what would it be? I used to like sitting on the balcony, Lily admitted as they passed the sliding glass doors that led outside. But Daddy says it's not safe anymore. Grace looked at the wide enclosed balcony with its high railings and soft outdoor furniture. It looks pretty safe to me. What do you think the danger is? Lily shrugged. I don't know. I think he just worries about everything now. That evening, Grace helped Lily with dinner in a way that felt completely different from the clinical routine she had grown used to. Instead of focusing on nutrition charts and calorie counts, Grace talked about flavors and textures and asked Lily what foods reminded her of happy memories. My mom used to make this soup when I was little, Lily said suddenly. It had carrots and chicken in these little star-shaped noodles. She said the stars would make wishes come true. That sounds wonderful, Grace said. Do you remember what it tasted like? It was warm and a little bit salty, and it smelled like home, Lily said, her eyes getting distant with the memory. What happened to your mom? Grace asked gently. She died when I was 5. Car accident. Lily said it simply, like she had learned to report this fact without feeling it too deeply. Grace reached over and squeezed Lily's hand. I'm sorry, sweetheart. That must have been very hard. Daddy says I shouldn't think about sad things because it makes me upset. And being upset is bad for my condition. Grace frowned. She was beginning to understand why this bright, creative child had become so withdrawn. Everyone in her life was so focused on protecting her from pain that they had forgotten she was still a human being who needed to feel all of her emotions, not just the safe ones. You know what I think? Grace said. I think it's okay to feel sad sometimes. And I think it's okay to miss people we love. Those feelings don't make us weaker. They remind us how much love we have in our hearts. For the first time since Grace had arrived, Lily really looked at her. Not just a polite glance, but a real look, like she was trying to figure out if this adult could be trusted with important things. Do you really think that? Lily asked. I really do, Grace said. And I think your mom would want you to remember all the good things you shared, even if it makes you a little sad sometimes. That night, after Grace had gone home, Robert found Lily sitting by her bedroom window. But instead of staring blankly at the park below, she was actually watching the people and the cars and the life happening outside. How was your day with Grace? Robert asked. Different, Lily said. She doesn't talk like the other nurses. Different? How? Lily thought for a moment. She talks to me like I'm still me. Robert felt something shift in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, Grace Thompson was exactly what his daughter needed. 3 weeks had passed since Grace started working with Lily, and Robert couldn't deny that something was changing in his daughter. She was talking more at dinner, asking questions about Grace's life in Jamaica, and even laughing occasionally at Grace's funny stories about her own 3 children back home. But Robert still kept his distance, burying himself in work and letting Grace handle most of Lily's daily care. On this particular Tuesday evening, Robert was running late from a board meeting that had stretched past 7 o'clock. He usually made it home by 6 to have dinner with Lily. But tonight, the discussions about their new product launch had gone longer than expected. As he rode the elevator up to his penthouse, he felt the familiar guilt that came with putting work before his daughter. The elevator doors opened, and Robert stepped into his apartment expecting to find Grace and Lily in the dining room, or perhaps watching television in the living room. Instead, he heard something that made him freeze in place. Music was playing softly from somewhere deeper in the apartment, and he could hear Grace's voice singing along to a gentle Caribbean melody. Robert set down his briefcase and followed the sound, walking quietly through the hallway toward the living room. What he saw when he reached the doorway made his heart stop completely. Lily was standing, actually standing on her own 2 feet, with Grace's hands gently supporting her waist. They were swaying together to the music, Lily's face turned upward. toward Grace with an expression of pure joy that Robert hadn't seen since before the accident. His daughter's legs, which doctors had told him would never support her weight again, were holding her up as she moved in a slow, careful dance. Robert gripped the doorframe, afraid that if he moved or made a sound, this impossible moment would shatter like a dream. He watched as Grace guided Lily through simple movements, their conversation too quiet for him to hear, but their connection obvious in every gesture. "That's it, sweetheart," Grace was saying softly. "Feel the music in your body. Your legs remember how to do this, even if they're different now." Lily giggled, a sound that Robert realized he hadn't heard in almost a year. "It feels funny, like my legs are asleep, but awake at the same time." "That's perfectly normal," Grace assured her. "Your muscles have been resting, but they're still there. They still remember how to work, they just need some encouragement." Robert's mind was racing. How was this possible? Every specialist he had consulted had been clear that while Lily might regain some strength in her upper body, her legs would never be able to support her weight again. Yet here she was, standing and moving in ways that defied everything he had been told. As he watched, Grace began to sing a lullaby in what Robert assumed was Jamaican patois, her voice warm and soothing. Lily closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, her small body relaxing into the gentle rhythm. For those few minutes, she wasn't a sick child or a medical case or a tragedy. She was just a little girl dancing with someone who cared about her. Then Lily opened her eyes and saw her father standing in the doorway. Her face immediately changed from joy to fear, and her legs began to shake. "Daddy!" she gasped, and Robert could see her starting to panic. Grace immediately tightened her support, helping Lily ease back into her wheelchair with practiced gentleness. "It's okay, baby girl. You did so well. Your daddy just came home early." Robert stepped into the room, his emotions churning between amazement, confusion, and something that might have been anger. What exactly is going on here? Grace straightened up, meeting his gaze directly. She didn't look guilty or defensive, just calm and ready to explain. "Lily and I have been working on some movement exercises. Nothing dangerous, I promise." Movement. Exercises. Robert's voice was sharper than he intended. "Grace, my daughter has spinal muscular atrophy. Her doctors have been very clear about her limitations. What you're doing could be dangerous." Lily looked between her father and Grace, her earlier joy completely replaced by the familiar look of withdrawal that Robert knew too well. She was shrinking back into herself, waiting for the adults to make decisions about her life without including her in the conversation. "Mr. Harrison," Grace said quietly, "could we talk about this privately?" Robert nodded curtly and followed Grace into the kitchen, leaving Lily in her wheelchair in the living room. Once they were out of earshot, he turned to face the woman who had somehow achieved the impossible. "I need you to explain to me how my daughter was standing," Robert said, trying to keep his voice level. "The best doctors in the world have told me that's not possible." Grace leaned against the kitchen counter, choosing her words carefully. "I'm not a doctor, Mr. Harrison, so I can't explain the medical side of things, but what I can tell you is that I've been watching Lily very closely these past few weeks, and I noticed something the doctors might have missed. Which is, her condition gets worse when she's sad or scared or angry, and it gets better when she's happy and relaxed and feels safe." Grace paused, studying Robert's face. "I think Lily's body is capable of more than anyone realized, but her emotions have been holding her back." Robert shook his head. "That's not how spinal muscular atrophy works, Grace. It's a physical condition, not a psychological one. I'm not saying it's all in her head, Grace said firmly. I'm saying that her heart and her body are connected in ways that maybe the doctors don't fully understand. She went on to explain what she had been doing with Lily over the past 3 weeks. It had started small, with gentle massage while they talked or read together. Grace had noticed that Lily's muscle tension seemed to decrease when she was engaged in activities she enjoyed, so Grace had begun incorporating more movement into their daily routine, always disguised as games or fun activities rather than medical. Therapy. I brought some music from home, Grace continued. Songs that my grandmother used to sing to me when I was scared or sad. Music has a way of reaching parts of us that words can't touch. And I started encouraging Lily to move however. Felt good to her, without worrying about what she couldn't do. But the standing, Robert pressed. How is that possible? Grace smiled softly. That started about a week ago. Lily was telling me about a dance recital she had before the accident, and she got so excited that she tried to show me some of the moves from her wheelchair. I could see how badly she wanted to feel that freedom again. So I asked if she wanted to try standing up, just for a few seconds. And she could do it? Not at first. The first time, her legs could only hold her for maybe 10 seconds. But each day, she's gotten a little stronger, a little more confident. Tonight was the longest she's ever stood, almost 5 minutes. Robert ran his hands through his hair, trying to process what he was hearing. Grace, if the doctors knew you were encouraging her to do things beyond her supposed capabilities, they'd probably tell you to fire me, Grace finished. I know that. But Mr. Harrison, have you seen your daughter smile the way she did tonight? Have you heard her laugh like that since the accident? Robert had to admit that he hadn't. In fact, he realized with a pang of guilt that he had been so focused on managing Lily's condition that he had forgotten to pay attention to her happiness. What if she gets hurt? Robert asked. What if pushing her too hard makes her condition worse? I would never let anything happen to her, Grace said with quiet intensity. I love that little girl like she's my own daughter. Everything we do is at her pace, based on what she tells me she's feeling. I'm not pushing her beyond her limits. I'm helping her discover that her limits might not be where everyone thinks they are. They were interrupted by a small voice calling from the living room. Daddy? Grace? Are you mad at me? Robert and Grace looked at each other, and Robert could see the love and concern in Grace's eyes. This woman genuinely cared about his daughter, not as a job or a paycheck, but as a person worthy of hope and possibilities. They returned to the living room together, where Lily was sitting in her wheelchair looking small and worried. Robert knelt down beside his daughter's chair. I'm not mad at you, sweetheart. I was just surprised. I didn't know you had been working on standing up. Are you going to make Grace stop helping me? Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert looked into his daughter's green eyes and saw something he hadn't seen in 3 years. Hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe her life could be more than just managing a medical condition. No, he said finally, but I want to understand better what you two have been doing. Can you show me? Over the next hour, Grace and Lily demonstrated their daily routine. It wasn't anything dramatic or dangerous. It was gentle stretching, breathing exercises, simple movements that focused on what Lily could do rather than what she couldn't. Most importantly, it was all accompanied by conversation, laughter, and music that made the exercises feel like play rather than therapy. As Robert watched his daughter's face light up while she showed him a song Grace had taught her, he realized that somewhere along the way he had lost sight of who Lily really was. He had become so focused on her limitations that he had forgotten about her possibilities. That night, after Grace had gone home and Lily was asleep, Robert sat in his office staring at his daughter's medical files. All the reports and test results, and specialist opinions that had shaped how he thought about her future. For the first time, he wondered if maybe the doctors didn't know everything. Maybe there were kinds of healing that couldn't be measured in clinical trials or predicted by medical textbooks. Maybe sometimes the most important medicine was simply believing that miraculous things were still possible. The next morning, Robert woke up earlier than usual with a strange mix of excitement and nervousness in his chest. For the first time in 3 years, he felt like there might be real hope for his daughter's future. But he also knew he needed to be smart about how to move forward. He couldn't just ignore medical advice, but he also couldn't ignore what he had witnessed with his own eyes. After making some calls, Robert arranged for Dr. Patricia Williams, Lily's primary specialist, to come to the penthouse that afternoon. Dr. Williams had been treating Lily since the accident and had always been honest about the limitations of her condition. If anyone could help Robert understand what was happening, it would be her. When Grace arrived that morning, Robert was waiting, in the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee and a serious expression. "Grace, I want you to know that I'm not angry about what you've been doing with Lily," he began. "But I've asked her doctor to come by today. I need a medical professional to see what you two have accomplished and help me understand how to support it safely." Grace nodded, setting down her canvas bag. "I think that's wise, Mr. Harrison. I never wanted to do anything behind your back or against medical advice. I just saw a little girl who needed to feel hope again." "I know," Robert said, "and I can see how much you care about her. That's why I want to make this work, but I want to do it right." When Lily woke up, she immediately sensed that something important was happening. Her father was home at a time when he was usually already at work, and Grace seemed more serious than usual. "Is everything okay?" Lily asked as Grace helped her get ready for the day. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," Grace assured her. "Your daddy has asked Dr. Williams to come visit today so she can see how well you've been doing." Lily's face fell. "Are you in trouble because of what we've been doing?" Grace knelt down beside Lily's wheelchair and took her small hands in her own. "Listen to me carefully, baby girl. You have done nothing wrong. What we've been doing together is beautiful and wonderful, and I'm proud of every single step you've taken. Whatever happens today, I want you to remember how strong and brave you are." Dr. Williams arrived at 2 o'clock, carrying her medical bag and wearing the same serious expression she always had during Lily's appointments. She was a tall woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, and she had a reputation for being one of the best pediatric neurologists in the country. "Mr. Harrison," she said as Robert led her into the living room, "I understand. You have some concerns about Lily's care." "Not concerns exactly," Robert replied. "More like questions about possibilities I hadn't considered before." Robert introduced Dr. Williams to Grace, and he could see the doctor sizing up the woman, who had somehow achieved what medical science said was impossible. Grace stood tall and confident, not intimidated by the doctor's credentials or formal manner. "Grace," Dr. Williams said, "Mr. Harrison tells me you've been working with Lily on some kind of physical therapy. I need to understand exactly what you've been doing." "Of course," Grace replied. "Would you like me to show you?" For the next hour, Grace demonstrated the gentle exercises and movements she had been doing with Lily. She explained her approach of combining physical activity with emotional support, using music and storytelling to help Lily relax and feel confident in her body. Dr. Williams watched everything carefully, occasionally asking questions about technique or frequency. She examined Lily thoroughly, testing her muscle strength and reflexes in ways that were more comprehensive than any previous appointment. "Lily," Dr. Williams said when she finished her examination, "Grace tells me you've been able to stand up. Can you show me?" Lily looked nervously at her father and then at Grace. "Will you help me?" "Always," Grace said, moving to support Lily, as she had done so many times before. What happened next left Dr. Williams speechless. Not only did Lily stand with Grace's support, but she held the position for several minutes while carrying on a normal conversation. Her legs, which had been declared essentially useless 3 years earlier, were clearly providing significant support for her body weight. "This is—" Dr. Williams started, then stopped, shaking her head in amazement. "This should not be possible, given her initial diagnosis and prognosis." "But it is possible," Robert said. "We're seeing it happen." Dr. Williams sat down heavily in one of the living room chairs, staring at Lily, who was now back in her wheelchair but glowing with pride at having demonstrated her progress. "I need to be honest with all of you," Dr. Williams said finally. "When I first diagnosed Lily, her condition was severe. The muscle weakness and the damage we saw in her initial tests suggested that significant improvement was highly unlikely. I've been treating her based on that initial assessment." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But bodies, especially young bodies, can sometimes surprise us. It's possible that Lily's emotional state after the trauma was affecting her physical condition more than we realized. Depression and anxiety can absolutely impact muscle function and motor control." Grace leaned forward. "So what we've been doing, focusing on her happiness and confidence, that could actually be helping her physical recovery." "It's not just possible, it's probable," Dr. Williams admitted. "The connection between emotional well-being and physical health is stronger than many doctors give credit for, especially in children who have experienced trauma." Robert felt a mixture of relief and frustration. "Why didn't anyone tell us this 3 years ago?" "Because we were focused on the medical crisis," Dr. Williams said. "We were trying to stabilize her condition and prevent further deterioration. Sometimes in our effort to be realistic about limitations, we forget to explore possibilities." The doctor spent another hour with them, creating a new treatment plan that incorporated Grace's methods with medical oversight. She recommended bringing in a music therapist and a physical therapist who specialized in holistic approaches to disability care. Most importantly, she emphasized that Lily's emotional well-being should be considered just as important as her physical therapy. "Grace," Dr. Williams said as she prepared to leave, "I don't know where you learned to do what you've been doing, but you have a gift. This child has made more progress in 3 weeks with you than she made in 3 years with conventional treatment." After the doctor left, Robert sat down with Grace and Lily in the living room. For the first time since the accident, he felt like they were having a conversation about possibilities rather than limitations. "I owe you both an apology," Robert said. "Lily, I was so scared of losing you that I forgot you were still living. And Grace, I almost let my fear prevent me from seeing the miracle you've helped create." Over the following weeks, Robert made dramatic changes to how their household operated. He reduced his work hours, spending mornings with Lily before Grace arrived and evenings after Grace went home. He had the music room renovated and bought Lily a new keyboard, this one positioned so she could play it whether sitting or standing. They started taking short trips outside the penthouse, first just to the building's garden, then to the park across the street where Lily could watch other children play and sometimes join in activities that worked with her wheelchair. These Outings were carefully planned and always included Grace, but they marked a huge shift in how Robert thought about his daughter's life. Most significantly, Robert established the Harrison Foundation for Holistic Child Care, dedicated to helping families understand that children with disabilities needed more than just medical treatment. Grace became the foundation's first director of family services, a position that came with a substantial salary and benefits that allowed her to bring her own children to New York. The foundation's first project was creating a resource center where families could learn about combining traditional medical care with emotional support, music therapy, art therapy, and other approaches that treated the whole child rather than just the condition. 6 months after that first evening, when Robert discovered Lily standing, his daughter gave her first public presentation to a group of doctors and families at the foundation's opening ceremony. She stood at a podium with Grace beside her for support and spoke about the importance of believing in possibilities. 3 years ago, I thought my life was over, Lily said, her voice clear and strong. I thought being in a wheelchair meant I couldn't do anything fun anymore. But Grace taught me that having limitations doesn't mean having no possibilities. She taught me that the most important thing isn't what your body can't do, it's what your heart believes you can become. As Robert watched his daughter speak confidently to an audience of adults, he realized that the real transformation hadn't been physical. Yes, Lily was stronger and could stand for longer periods, and she had regained abilities that doctors said were impossible. But more importantly, she had regained her sense of self, her confidence, and her belief that her life could be full of joy and purpose. Grace had given them both something more valuable than medical treatment. She had given them hope, and in doing so, she had helped them discover that sometimes the most powerful medicine wasn't found in hospitals or prescription bottles. Sometimes it was found in the simple act of one person seeing another person's potential and refusing to give up on it. That night, as Robert tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at him with the same bright eyes she'd had before the accident. "Daddy," she said, "I'm glad Grace came to live with us." "Me too, sweetheart," Robert replied. "Me too." For the first time in 3 years, Robert went to sleep feeling truly grateful for what they had, rather than devastated by what they had lost. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new possibilities, but tonight, his daughter was happy, and that was enough to make him believe in miracles again.